Opposing sides have laid out their battle plans in opening statements at the AT&T Time Warner merger trial. The U.S. government is fighting to stop the deal, arguing it would raise prices for consumers. AT&T says its analysis shows actually just the opposite. Time Warner is, of course, CNN's parent company, and our Jessica Snyder has just left the courtroom to join us live now from Washington. So Jessica, just sum up the opening arguments on both sides, particularly from the government attorneys. Just explain why they are so adamant that this deal does not go through.
They are very adamant about this, Zain. And of course, like you said, day one of this trial has just wrapped up. Of course, this was the day where both sides gave their opening arguments. So the government did, in fact, go first. This is the first time in about 40 years that the Department of Justice is taking a company to court to block a vertical merger. Now, this is a vertical merger because AT&T and Time Warner, they don't directly compete. AT&T distributes video content, and Time Warner creates that video content. They own several different entities like HBO, Warner Brothers Studios, as well as those Turner networks that include CNN. So the government laid out its case in a 45-minute opening argument to the judge. This is not a jury trial. One judge alone, a district court judge, a federal judge here in Washington, D.C., he will decide this case. So the government litigators spoke for about 45 minutes this morning, and they basically said that if AT&T acquires this Time Warner content, they will have the power to restrict the content for other cable distributors, and they could potentially raise the rates of the Time Warner programming when selling it to other cable distributors. They have an economist that they're going to put up as a witness, and the economist has done some research, and they say that that AT&T could potentially raise prices for individual consumers at 45 cents a month. Of course, AT&T sort of saying, first of all, those numbers are wrong, and AT&T, secondly, dismissing those numbers as not a major price increase. So we saw all of these arguments laid out, really a preview to the case here, and they did call their first witness, the government calling a competitor, Cox Communications, which is a competitor cable distributor, kind of saying that this would be bad for business if we let AT&T and Time Warner merge. But again, Zain, this is the first time in 40 years that the government has challenged this type of merger, I should say, brought it to court. So it'll be interesting to see how this really plays out. And of course, the judge is the one arbiter here, the one who will determine whether or not this merger goes through. Zain?
Merger, not murder, but as you mentioned, a
it's been a long day in court.
I can imagine.
Yes.
Jessica Snyder, live for us. Thank you so much. All right, executives at Time Warner say that regulators are targeting a traditional media company while going easy on bigger digital rivals, for example, Facebook and Google. Facebook has certainly been in the news a lot recently. To give you some perspective on that, AT&T is a $227 billion company, itself about 3 times the size of Time Warner. The value of a combined AT&T and Time Warner would still be dwarfed by Facebook. The social network is actually valued at $538 billion. And just as a thought, for example, let's experiment. Let's throw in 21st Century Fox as well with AT&T and Time Warner. That company would still be smaller than Facebook. Joining me live now is Brian Stelter, our resident media expert. So Brian, here's what a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
Why go after these sort of old school traditional media companies like Time Warner and AT&T when Facebook is the modern day media empire?
Right. Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, these companies, sometimes called FANG, these 5 companies, they are giants in the marketplace, as you showed right there, much bigger than these media companies. However, the antitrust department of the DOJ says it's pursuing this case because AT&T and Time Warner are the ones trying to do a deal. You know, Facebook, they go out and buy small companies, but they don't go out and buy
Facebook's been in a lot of trouble
ones.
recently in terms of accumulating too much power.
Right, and frankly, I think the argument we're going to hear in court for the next 6 to 8 weeks from the AT&T lawyer is, why are you picking on us when you're not looking at these tech guys? In fact, we heard that today from Dan Petroselli. He said, the government's argument is stuck in the past. You all are looking at an outdated model of how the media world works. Yes, cable channel owners do have some power. Yes, AT&T has a lot of power as well. But AT&T and Time Warner, the argument for this deal is that in order to thrive in the future, they've got to get bigger to compete with the Facebooks and with the Googles. And by the way, they're not the only companies that feel that way. Verizon feels the same way. Comcast feels the same way. All of these distributors of content, whether through your broadband connection or through your wireless phone, they all feel the same anxiety about the Facebooks and the Googles.
And it's interesting, though, because with Facebook, especially given what's happened over the past, I guess, week or so, we could actually end up seeing regulation against Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg himself said he would be actually open to it.
Yeah, he actually opened the door for the very first time to that possibility in his interview with Lori Siegel. Whether there is a government appetite to take on Facebook, though, I think remains to be seen. We've heard from a handful of lawmakers who do want to have that conversation. We've not heard necessarily from the most powerful U.S. senators and representatives who have the power to make that happen, nor have we heard from the executive branch, from President Trump on this matter. So I'm personally, count me as skeptical on the front of actual, very substantive Facebook action. When it comes to this deal, though, with AT&T and Time Warner, we're going to see that argument play out in court. You know, this counter argument that merger will cause people's cable bills to go up
by 45 cents a month.
By 45, you know, we've heard versions of that argument for a long time. We heard it when Comcast and NBC were getting together almost a decade ago. We've heard it in the past as well. The difference now is it's actually being fought in court. And let's be honest, the other factor here, President Trump. That's not going to come up in court. But the backdrop of this trial is President Trump's disdain for CNN. That's why there's been speculation that maybe somehow there are political motivations here. Now, the DOJ denies that, but that's certainly on the minds of the people in the courtroom.
And as Jessica Snyder was mentioning, rarely do you see a government lawsuit to block a vertical merger like this one.
That's why nobody quite knows what's going to happen. That's why this is so interesting. We haven't seen this in our generation.
Right, Delta, live for us. Good to see you. Thank you so much.